I said he's a bad guy. He's a fellow planner. He's a good guy.
I want to hear this.
The members of council to chamber for quorum, please.
We should take this opportunity to talk about traffic calming on Long Street.
One second. Ladies and gentlemen, Councillor DeChano. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. I now have quorum. Thank you, Councillor DeChano. This session of Total York Community Council is being held tonight to consider the following items: EY 31.1, final report 70 Dixfield Drive zoning bylaw amendment application, and item 31.8, request for direction report 240 Markland Drive zoning bylaw amendment application. Just before we start this meeting, there's only two different meetings. The catchment area is very large for both of these. I think it was 2,000 people. So this meeting starts for 31.1 now, and then we cannot start 31.8 until 7:45. We cannot start it earlier. So we're hoping it'll all kind of flow, but there might be a little break. The local council will send him to Tim Hortons for coffee for everybody. So, okay, so we have a speakers list here. Number of speakers. You have 5 minutes to speak. You don't get to question us. We get to question you, and we'll keep you to your time. And I'll give you a little reminder if you're getting close to 5 minutes, and we'll start the meeting. So, our first speaker for 31.1 is Dana Kozlowski, President of York Conduit Corporation. Dana, are you here? Good evening. Welcome. And just pull that mic down. And welcome. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council. I have a PowerPoint. Brad, please. Thank you. So my name is Dana Kozlowski, and I sit as president of York Condominium Corporation number 202, and I'm also an owner that lives in 714 the West Mall, which is that part of that corporation. And so in order for us to express our concerns to you, I thought I would bring our community to you at council because everybody is so busy. So if you can bear with me, there's a little slideshow. So this is, what you're looking at is 714, 716, the West Mall, which is at the very top of the mall. We are 434 units. We are 93+% owner occupied, so very little tenancy. We have a separate garage entry, separate garage exit, and our visitor parking and service driveways are on either side of the building so that they serve the buildings from the back. My next slide is for YCC 281, 625, 627, the West Mall. They have 417 suites, and they are approximately 85% plus owner occupied. Their issue is that they have 2 driveways. This is only the first of one. So their access, again, for services, for visitors, etc., is just south of us. My next slide will show you the view going down the West Mall. So this driveway on the left is the driveway, the second driveway from 625, 627, and you can see the proximity to the island and to the stop sign at Wellsworth and the West Mall. My next slide will show you the service driveway to 70 Dixfield being at the back of their building, and then of course the 625, 627 driveway, and you'll see shortly how that can impact on traffic, and so that's the next slide. Almost. So this is the 2 driveways looking across from each other. And the next slide, it gives you a closer image of where that barrier is, that island. And that island actually slows the traffic down coming up the West Mall and into the 2 condominium buildings in the back of the service driveway, because it forces the cars to come into a single lane, either going south or north or turning onto Wellsworth at that point. So the next slide, and this is sort of typical non-rush hours. So there are cars coming from every which direction. They've actually had to change the pedestrian walkway across the stop sign because they couldn't have pedestrians walking from the bus stop. They kind of do an L. They walk across to the north side of Wellsworth, and they cross over if they're going to either one of the 2 condominium buildings. And so then we go to the next slide. So one of the issues that we had is the traffic report that was done done on February the 11th, 2016, and we were told that it was a typical day typical activity in the neighborhood. It was minus 25. Anybody who wanted to be at home probably stayed at home, so the traffic study was not, in our view, very well implemented. So the next slide will show you our traffic study. The key fob system, it has a garage key fob and a car fob and card fob, and all it does is it tracks the cars in and out of the garage. To be perfectly fair to everybody, we picked a not so nice month of the year. We picked November. We did a full week from Sunday to Saturday, and you can see we were very fair again with the times. Sunday was 6:30 a.m. to 10, as is the other days of the week, and 3 to 8 p.m. And you can see that there's a lot of traffic back and forth, and this doesn't include the two driveways from YCC 281 at 625, 627, the West Mall. So the next slide, again, is typical. There's the bus. You get 3 or 4 cars backed up. This is on Wellsworth. And then with that, you have you have the issue of the backup going back into the neighbor's neighborhood. We also have an issue of congestion, air pollution, and then we have the number of residents in our buildings combined is probably close to 2,500. And the issue at that point is you have people with scooters, you have people with other mobility aids, young children, skateboards and cyclists, and so forth. So then the next slide. Again, just typical traffic in the neighborhood off-peak. The next slide this is what happens down the West Mall, and I will thank the council for the city for allowing us an extra 3 seconds on the green light, but it's not doing anything to move the traffic along, and our issue is that with more cars in the neighborhood, this is just going to impound the problem all the way back, not only up the West Mall, but into the neighborhood behind. My next one is so this is one of our personal issues. What you're seeing here is kind of where the post is behind the first tree is going to be part of their garage foundation, but where the fence is directly in front of it, that's our property line, and it's 18 centimeters from the property line to their garage wall. Okay. So basically, the bottom line is that we need a proper traffic study, and we need to somehow resolve the serious possibility of encroachment. I thank you for your time. All I ask is that you take our comments into consideration because it's a very important decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, stay there. Stay there. You got a question from your councillor? Deputy Mayor Hall, do you have a question?
Thank you for speaking to us tonight. I'm going to do a sneaky councillor's trick and ask you the question, is there anything else that you'd like to add, because your time ran out? And I know that you've worked very hard on behalf of the condominium corporation next door, and 5 minutes is not a lot of time to talk about some of the issues that we had discussed.
Thank you. So one of the other two issues is water pressure and hydro, and with the city's help last year, we addressed part of the water pressure issue, but we still have to constantly, we take readings twice a day, every day, because the water pressure still does fluctuate. And the other issue is that because the infrastructure is so old with the hydro, we're concerned that adding more units and more people within that corner is going to just draw that much more on the hydro and the water services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Campbell, the question.
Was one of your main objections the increased traffic? You said the traffic, did you see the traffic study? Because one was submitted, and our staff was satisfied with it. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, and respectfully, that's why I thought I would bring our community to you. But in all seriousness, I did look at the study, and I don't think that it gave credibility to what's actually going on in the neighborhood.
So you think that the situation is bad enough now that anything else is just makes it incrementally worse?
I think so. I believe so. And just sort of as on a personal note, I walk the neighborhood. Like I'm out there at least twice a day walking, and I've seen the increase in the traffic, and my concern is that corner will cause issues not only for us on the West Mall, but for the neighborhood in general, and that's our position.
Aside from the fact that it's a development, do you have any issues with the height of the building or the other buildings proposed? You don't? Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much. Next speaker, Janice Robinson. Good evening, welcome.
Good Good evening, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman, members
5
of
minutes.
Community Council. My name is Janice Robinson. I'm planning consultant representing the owners of 70 Dixfield. The owners are 70 Dixfield West Mall, Inc. This is a proposal to add just 88 units to a property that's currently occupied by a 12-story building that contains 141 units. So it's already much smaller than what's around it. This building, the current building, was built by the existing owners in the 70s. The buildings will be a 58-unit, 6-story, mid-rise building situated on the West Mall, and 30 walk-up 3-story apartment buildings. All of the units being built are either 3 bedrooms plus den, or 2 bedrooms plus den. So there's many units. All of them are being built sized for families. After adding 88 units, the site coverage will still only be 20%. The floor space index, 1.39 times the lot area. Total of 239 units, much less than the 400 unit plus sites around it. To accommodate the development, the surface parking area will be reconfigured. There'll be an expansion of the underground parking garage. That will result in 264 parking spaces, of which 30 will be for visitors. The entrance to the West Mall will be opened up. So there's going to be 2 entrances that the development can be used. But the parking garage is over on close to Dixfield. That's going to be reconfigured as well. The traffic and parking study was submitted for the development. City staff have reviewed it. Engineering staff were asked to reconsider whether additional studies should be done because the counts were done on a cold day, and they agreed that no further study was required. The traffic from this development, looking at using the trip generation amounts, would be 45 cars per hour peak in the AM, and that's in an hour and going distributed amongst 2 driveways and going in all directions, and then 55 in the PM. So it's not, these numbers are not big. The existing traffic conditions are the existing traffic conditions, and that's the traffic department, who's reviewed our study, has concluded that the impact is not significant. There have been engineering studies prepared, including a stormwater management plan, hydrogeological report on groundwater. Those consultants are here tonight if there are any questions. There's a considerable number of improvements being proposed as a result of this development in conjunction with it. There's going to be renovations to the lobby, a new lounge, indoor amenity room to be added, new amenity room furnishings, new pool furnishings, new outdoor amenity areas, landscaping throughout the site. All of the facilities will be on the site, will be shared by all of the new tenants and the existing tenants. All of these improvements will be in a Section 37 agreement. We've been working with staff for 3 years to bring the project to this point. There have been meetings with the community, with tenants. We have representatives of the York Condo 202 next door. The owners are committed to providing additional new rental housing on a site that's currently underutilized. This is to meet the demand for units for families that they know exists, because they have people walking into their leasing office all the time wanting to lease units. The staff report discusses all of the issues related to this development and concludes that all of those issues have been addressed for the rezoning of this development. As recommended by staff, we request that Community Council approve this application for rezoning.
Thank you. You have a question, Councillor Holliday?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Robinson, for speaking to us. I just wanted you to confirm the tenure of the new development. Are these condominiums or are they rental buildings?
Rental.
So does that mean your client desires to own these over the long term?
Yes.
Okay, brings me to my next question. Parking is extremely sensitive in this area, as it is in many parts of the ward. And a lot of residents are concerned about what's going to happen during construction, but what's going to happen over the long haul. Do you firmly believe that you have enough parking to accommodate your existing tenants and the new ones entirely on site? Given that this is now a rental building, the risk goes to you.
Well, yes. The parking study was done, and it proposed, there was a total of 264 spaces. It was based on existing utilization. I mean, we had the rent rolls and the parking. You know, some people have 2 cars, but a lot of people don't even own a car. It's a location that's well served by transit. So the answer is there's going to be sufficient parking for tenants, and that's just projecting the current rates on the future units.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the sun and shadow studies. I monitored the correspondence, and we may not hear a lot of speakers about it tonight, but some of the residents, in particular to the north, in the homes, are worried about shadow impact. Can you describe what those impacts are according to the engineering studies that you've submitted?
Well, the shadow drawings done by the architect show that there is no shadow impact on those units to the north. The buildings 1, 2, and 3 are 9.7 meters away from the north boundary. Those are the lots that are on Brigada Crescent. So it's a 9.7 meter setback. They meet the 45-degree angular plane. Those buildings are only 10 meters high. That's like a height of a detached dwelling to the top of the ridge. Typically 10 meters is what's required in a lot of zones of the city, and a 7.5 meter setback is a typical rear yard setback. So these are 10-meter buildings, 9.7 meters away, and they meet the 45-degree angular plane measured from the lot line.
Okay, another concern that has come up repeatedly in the neighborhood, because many of us were stung very badly in the floods, is the effect on stormwater. And I know that this has been a topic throughout this particular project. Can you tell us some of the features that you are prepared to implement to ensure that stormwater is dealt with?
Well, there's a big storage tank that's going to be constructed under the ground near the corner, underneath the big lawn area, and that will control the release of stormwater. It will collect the stormwater and release it at proper rates. Now, if you want more information than that, I would call up the engineer to, if you want more explanation than that.
That's
but
documented.
I can tell you that you know, we've been at this for a long time with engineering, with Toronto Engineering, and they are now satisfied. And it took until that's how this report was able to get forward, because they are now satisfied.
And maybe the simplest way to ask you the question is, do you firmly believe that with the work that you're planning to do, the stormwater capacity will be equal to what it is today or better than what it is today? The net impact?
I would say no impact, so equal.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Giorgio?
Just out of curiosity, what was the, I noticed that the parking ratio for visitors is 0.13 per additional unit, and that's typically on the low side. I'm just wondering to what extent the parking that you provided on the site prior to intensification, was the visitor parking at 0.2 per parking space, or are you just replicating the way it was before?
There's a huge surplus of parking on the site now. Huge
I see.
surplus.
So the existing...
So they, you know, it's hard to, they did counts, but then it's not always easy to determine how much were visitors. So we've applied a visitor parking standard, but the amount of parking being proposed is similar to the ratio that exists now.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Are there any further speakers to them before we bring in the committee? Yes? Yep, please come forward, state your name, and you have 5 minutes. And your address.
Hopefully there'll be less. I'm Melanie Knight, and I'm the president of the Dixfield Area Residents Association.
Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Further to Dana from the president of the condo and Jan from 70, obviously as part of the community we want to make sure we're all working together for the good of the community. And in everything that I've heard and been part of through this, and being here as a stand for the neighborhoods and the homeowners, there are some key pieces that keep filtering, and we hear chuckles in the back of the group. And the key is that there is a traffic issue. Regardless of the studies, they're not as accurate as what you see on a daily basis from walkers, from cars. And it's not that the 70 Dixfield proposal will cause the problem, it will just, they also will feel the impact of having an increased amount on the property. The second thing that's of concern is the utilities, both on the stormwater side, but also the hydro. In this area, especially over the last several months, you can find a daily outage on power and the utilities. So we're looking to make sure that we're working with council, with the city, to appropriate that, all of those pieces, and working with 70 Dixfield on that proposal. As far as the parking, the one thing I would bring up is we don't have, and nor do we want to have, permit parking on the roads. And what I just heard was, I'm aware that we're having 3 3-story buildings and a 6-story building, and I heard that the 3 3-story buildings are three bedrooms, anywhere from a 1 to 3 bedroom plus, and issued towards families. Nowadays, in the real estate market, the rentals are required, because if you can't get in as a first-time buyer, and you'll also find that children, and I don't mean young children, I mean adult children with cars, with full-time jobs, actually live at home. So there is a higher propensity for having more than a 1-to-1 ratio for a car, which could then lead to an impact on what do they do when they've rented it and they have more than one car. So I'm just bringing that to the table as part of the homeowners association.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Campbell, the question.
So do you object to the notion that this development is going to occur, or do you object to the fact that the city hasn't done enough to mitigate the traffic?
No, I don't object to it for a number of reasons. One, because I think we're probably past that point given the amount of work that's been in there, and because I believe that there is a need in the community to leverage that. And from a conversation that we had just as early as last week with H&R Development, I found it very strong that they are a community partner, and therefore will also have the same concern once they're in development about the traffic.
So what do you think needs to happen?
I think traffic studies at different areas need to occur. I think things such as changes in medians, changes in options of lighting in different areas. What we're finding is we've also got a new area with, 20 houses on Erin View Terrace, which is a new development that just came through. And you're seeing traffic coming down there. They're coming from different areas down in Philly.
So you'd rather see, before this all goes forward and the shovels get in the ground, you'd rather see a plan from the city to figure out the traffic now rather than after it happens?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Along with power and along with an understanding of the stormwater pieces, yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Quick question, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you for speaking to us, and I think we've enjoyed a very good working relationship for some time. And I guess my question to you is in light of the issues that have come up, and they're not new ones, I just want to know if the neighborhood is still willing to work with the councillor's office and the developer and the various city departments to keep tackling these, because I think we need to spend a lot more time on these issues, and as you put it, not just at the intersection of this building, but in places further out on the neighborhood, and the ripple effect that's created by a lot of things that are happening. And I'll just couch to, we heard earlier that the traffic light at the corner of West Mall and Rathburn can actually cause problems further into the neighborhood because it delays cars. And you're still on board for that, I'm hoping.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And very quickly to that, I'm in real estate and I'm watching this community, and this community is in a transition phase. You're watching bungalows going to second stories. You're seeing families expand within that and young families coming in. So the natural progression is that we have a wide diversity of demographics with seniors as well as young families and growing families. And so as seniors move out into other facilities, you're going to see that more and more, and it's going to impact what we're dealing with now.
So being in the industry, and not speaking as a planner, but as a real estate professional, you're familiar with need. Would you say that the additional rental stock is helpful in central Etobicoke, where we haven't seen any growth in some time.
Yes.
Okay, and do you think that, provided the development is done carefully and compatibly, it's something that would have either a neutral or a positive effect on the neighborhood and the value of homes?
I think that's a two-part question. So first, I would say that the answer is yes, I believe that rental is there, because now with the market the way it is, and if you look at our housing market, we're sitting in the 850 to $1.5 million in that area, and that's not taking into consideration the condo buildings as owners. And when we look at the rental piece, I think the concern would be the type of rental units it will be.
Right.
That will match and equal what the homeowners' values are. So if it's low-income housing, it's not going to increase the value, and it's going to create grave concern in the area.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. See no further questions. Thank you. Any further speakers to the item? Yes, sir. Please come forward. Please state your name and address, please.
Councilors, my name is Milan Radic. I live in YCC 281, West Mall 627.
Pull up a little bit more if you don't mind.
I'm trying to.
There you go. Thank you.
Squeak it up. Okay, I did send last year to Councillor Holliday an email concerning about this development. The email was not kind of a high technical email, but it was kind of a blunt email trying to explain the situation, what we will be facing when this construction goes through. I know that my condominium building has 427 units, times 3, that's 1,200 people, times YCC 202. We're talking about 2,500 people living in that corner of the West Mall. We're talking about the 600 parking spaces in YCC 281, 600 cars. It's fully occupied. We're not talking about other vehicles that are renting the space outside on the visitors, in terms of the people having their businesses and parking the bigger vehicles outside. 2 buildings, that's 1,200 vehicles coming out of those buildings every day, right? And we're having a stop sign down there. Tonight I hear nobody talks about the TTC. We have 2 lines running on Wellsworth. We have 2 lines running on the Radbourne. And the area is not ready to receive any extra traffic in this matter, because it's bad. Not talking about the service vehicles, not talking about school buses and all other delivery vehicles, and et cetera and et cetera. The other thing is, considering that the owners of over 800 units adjacent to this future construction site are very nervous about noise levels, because if you look at the design of these buildings, 625, 627, 714, 715, like a half moon shaped. If you stand in front of those buildings, right down there at the crescent, and yell, it's not only a noise, it's amplified, totally. Are we going to live with this amplified noise for the next 2 years? That's a huge concern. The other thing is, just give me a second here. We're talking about vehicles. They're using the Wellsworth, Dixfield, Radbourne, bypassing the 427 traffic jam using Ramford. Did anybody consider that? If anybody experienced something like that, it's a huge issue in this area, because the people coming on 401 East, if there is a problem on 427 South, believe me, they use Ramford, they get off, and they spread into the streets, coming out and bypassing that big curb that's going the 427 South from the 401 East. So that's a huge impact on our lives, and looking at my wife telling me all the morning, like, oh, I was late in the school because of the traffic so bad on West Mall and Radbourne on a street light. Today I'm coming up the West Mall. There is no left turning lights and right turning lights on this intersection. It's huge. The problem is this: should we object something like this? I really don't know, because everybody has his right, its own property, and he's trying to do the best for his enterprise, and understanding that. Is the city ready to issue this license? No, it's not, because the city didn't prepare this area to accept these new dwellings being built on this property, in terms of the storm waters, in terms of the traffic, and et cetera, and et cetera. So, my personal belief is careful studies about the noise levels during the construction, considering the two buildings, and the careful studies about preparing the area for this construction to be done. So in terms of the widening the streets, improving the sewage. Sewage is terrible. Every time we're having floodwaters on that intersection, Wellsworth and Westmore, that intersection is always flooded because of the stormwaters. So if the city is ready to go ahead and prepare the area for the construction of this magnitude in this corner of the West Mall,
Wrap up, sir, you're out of time.
yeah,
Please wrap up.
then definitely we might consider it and say, yeah, go ahead, guys, go ahead. Other than that, it's unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you for speaking to us tonight, Mr. Milanovic. Milan.
Radic.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand everything you said and put it into all the right contexts.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk to you about the traffic in the area, and I think everyone in the room will agree that there's an existing issue with traffic congestion and volume, and a lot of that has to do with the configuration of the streets. We've got stop signs, stop lights, multiple stop signs that are close together. And I've been there early in the morning, and I know exactly what it's like.
As I said, school buses and TTC buses.
School buses, TTC buses, pedestrians, multiple cars stopped. What I wanted to understand is if you agreed or disagreed with what the impact of the development is on the area. I want to leave aside that there's already a background issue. What the engineers have told us is that in the morning, this will create 47 new cars, and in the afternoon, it will create 66. And that's the combined coming and going. Do you feel that the assessment from them is accurate or not?
Not.
Okay. And why? Why do you feel that the assessment of 47 and 66 cars is not accurate?
Because if I want to get the plan done and make sure that I make everybody happy, I would make my numbers fit everybody.
Okay.
So basically, I'm telling you that basically, I believe the engineers didn't use true numbers to show this problem.
Okay, so you disagree with the traffic report.
Totally.
And this, I want to make a difference between the background traffic and the trip generation, because I heard from Dana already that there were some concerns about the background levels of traffic because of the counts, but that's one thing. But the other thing is the trip generation. And I'm going to play that forward, that should this ever get challenged into an adjudicative place like the LPAT, do you have any sense on what they would rely on as accurate numbers? Because that would be the challenge. You know, we disagree with these numbers, it creates too much traffic. I need to play the scenario forward. Do you have any thoughts on how we would address that?
As I said, to improve the area. Basically, what you have to do is, if you want to, for example, if you want to put a good TTC service in this area, well, the people relying on our TTC services anyways. The people already having issues boarding the city, public transportation, in order not to use the cars, right? So to help meet the environment needs. They're already having issues because of all the traffic, and we all witnesses to it. How the TTC buses and the school buses are just standing there, waiting for their turn to go on their way, you know, towards the Kipling subway station or the schools and everything. Any future effects, it's going to be worse, because multiplies the families grow, and then you're multiplying everything. So as I said, you're having almost 1,200 parking spaces in two buildings. They're already there, and plus the parking spaces of the rental building on a Dixie Field. And now you're adding another 250, 400, and it's not going to impact the area. I believe that's not the true point of view.
So I also want to ask about the stormwater management, because this is a different title but the same discussion. In the reports here, there are engineering studies that are saying to us that stormwater and sewage is adequately handled. but you said you were worried about it. Do you disagree with the assessment of the engineers, and why do you do that?
Well, should I take a pictures when the storm happens in the area?
Look, I'm familiar with that,
Yeah.
and I'm familiar with the upgrades to the system.
Like, I hear about this underground tank to be built to collect the sewer water. I'm just thinking about the size of the thing. It's gonna be a pretty big hole, I can tell you that. You know what I mean? Storm waters, collecting other stuff, considering, you know, the pesticides, oils and everything. Are you putting everything in the ground now?
So
Now you're having an environmental impact.
So a lot of this is dealt with in the materials related to the project. Do you have a specific criticism of them that I can address?
Yeah, you have to improve the sewage in the area in order to accept this new dwellings.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
The public sewage, definitely.
Okay, and I guess
Yeah.
the last is noise levels. You were worried about construction noise levels. There's bylaws on that. Is there any specific advice that you've got for the community council on what to do about construction noise?
Well, what you can do about it, maybe mute the engine. I really don't know what you can do about the construction noise. The construction noise is the construction noise. You cannot deal with it because it comes from machinery, it comes from the digging the ground and everything, and squeaking and yelling and whatever. And the construction workers, we know they're pretty loud and they have to be loud. But as I say, talking about the children and the families, they actually spend time in their dwellings during the construction day. Are the kids going to be deprived of the sleep? Because believe me, when the ice cream truck comes around and plays their song, it's pretty loud. So,
Fair enough.
so
Yes.
imagine when the big bulldozer comes around and start digging.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just to sum
And
up on
sorry,
that-
I just want to mention this. We're going to lose all the beautiful trees on the Dixie Field. They were really filtering the air in the area.
and you're familiar with the tree replanting plan, right?
Yeah, okay. I understand that. We
No,
all
I'm just, like, it's...
Sorry, I'm being a little bit sarcastic, because when you ask me a question like that, you just undermine my intelligence, you know what I'm trying to say.
I know, but you make a comment about the trees coming in.
Yeah, because they're beautiful. The squirrels are running around and everything, I can just love it,
Okay.
all right?
All right, so just to put a fine point on the noise, though, I just want to understand this. Are you advocating not to do the development because you're concerned about the construction noise, or are you just advocating to have controls put in place?
The construction could be done in 6 months. Maybe we can bear it,
Okay.
but we know it's not going to happen in 6 months. We all know that,
Okay.
right?
Well, you didn't answer the question. So you're advocating not to do the work because of the construction noise?
As I said, if you can do it in 6 months, by all means, because the guy needs to expand his business.
So I take that
But
as
if you're going to take it for 2 years, no, we're not ready for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none. Questions of staff? Deputy Mayor Hawley, questions of staff?
May I have transportation staff, please? So, Mr. Nicolucci, traffic is extremely sensitive on this project. We know this has been the issue from day one. I wondered if you could explain to Community Council your assessment of the traffic impact. So you would have critiqued the submissions by the applicant's engineer with respect to trip generation. Can you tell us how that works and why you are or maybe you're not confident with the numbers that they've submitted?
So, through the chair, so yes, they did submit a traffic impact study for this proposal, and the traffic impact study estimated the number of trips that would be generated by the development, and it adopted, in order to do that, it adopted the trip generation rates that are part of the Institute of Transportation Engineers land use tables in the trip generation manual. That is a typically accepted practice in the industry. And I might also add that, generally speaking, the trip generation rates in that manual are very suburban in nature. Granted, this site is not downtown, but the trip generation rates in that manual are very suburban in nature, and they're based on a number of trip generation surveys that have been done throughout North America, in various cities throughout North America. Cities in Texas, California, other cities in Canada. There's a number of surveys that are done. And they just compile that data to form trip generation rates for various types of land uses, and they get updated every few years as more studies come in. So again, that is a generally accepted practice in terms of estimating trips for developments in our discipline. And, as was mentioned earlier, according to the traffic study and using those trip generation rates, it estimated that the development would generate approximately 47 two-way trips, that's in and out trips during the AM peak hour, and 66 two-way trips during the PM peak hour, in and out trips again. That equates to approximately a vehicle a minute or less. And based on that assessment, we reviewed it, we critiqued that the traffic study, and we determined that the traffic impacts of the development are acceptable.
So the other thing that Dana spoke to us about was the information from her condominium, where they talked about key fob swipes. Can you tell me, how would the applicant have figured out the background traffic levels? How do they do this?
So, through the chair again, there's generally speaking, there's 3 layers that are part of a typical traffic impact study. There's the existing traffic layer, which basically, you go out to the intersections that are part of the study area and you count the vehicles that are passing through the intersection. Then there's the background traffic layer, which is projected vehicle trips that are part of the just general growth in traffic in the area. So it's usually a percentage per annum. Usually it's about 0.5% per annum, 1% per annum. And then there's the trip generation rates, which I just discussed right now, which is the other layer, and that relates to the site traffic layer. You amalgamate all those layers together to get your projected future volumes. And in terms of the issue that you pointed out in terms of the key fob for the existing condominium buildings in the area, whatever traffic is generated by the existing condominium buildings or any building in the area would normally be captured in the existing traffic volumes, because you're actually counting vehicles crossing the intersection or passing through the intersection. So whatever traffic is generated by any building in the area would be part of the existing traffic layer that I mentioned earlier.
So if, for whatever reason, the studies revealed that the existing traffic levels were underrepresented, yeah, it was a stormy day, it was cold, it was whatever, what is the effect if it turns out there is more background traffic on the area, and given we know the traffic generated by the development according to the methodology that you described earlier, that's the accepted practice, if the first number becomes higher, is that good, bad? Does it make a difference? Is the percentage of one now become less of the other? Do we have a problem?
Through the chair, generally speaking, when any of those layers in the traffic impact study that I mentioned, the existing traffic layer, the background traffic layer, and the trip generation layer, any of those layers, if they're incorrect to a significant degree, then any traffic study, the results or conclusions of that traffic study are basically considered null and void because those layers are incorrect. The question becomes, how significant of an error is there? We are dealing with something that is, for lack of a better phrase, balance of probabilities. We're dealing with human behavior here. So we cannot precisely estimate that the development will have exactly these trips. These are estimates. Sure, there's some days that the trips will be a little bit higher, some days that the trips are a little bit lower, but we're dealing with balance of probabilities here. We're dealing with human behavior. So it's the best effort that we can get in terms of estimating all those layers. But to your point, if any of those layers are incorrect to a very significant degree, then it could alter significantly the conclusions of the traffic study.
So if the study is saying there's 1,000 cars that go through the particular stop sign intersection today, which is a lot of cars, and I'm sure it's busy at rush hour, if there's 68 cars or 48 cars or 98 cars versus 1,000, is that, in your view, as a traffic professional, a significant margin of error that would change the outcome?
Through the chair, are you referring
in this case,
a signalized intersection?
No, I'm just saying, there is some concern over the numbers that were expressed by people, and I want to make sure that this community council is confident in the numbers. The number that was given to us in the PM was 66. If it turns out to be 75, if it turns out to be 43, compared to an intersection with 1,000 cars in it, maybe 1,500 cars if there's a large margin, is that significant? Does that change your view of things?
Through the chair, I think I understand your question. In my opinion, no. It's not a significant change.
Okay. Thank you. May I speak to planning, please? I'm going to wrap up. Thank you. Yep. Okay. I wanted to just summarize, because I'm out of question time. Your job as a planner is to consolidate the file and connect with other departments. There were concerns raised from an engineering perspective, and I wondered if you could offer comment to that on how you what you saw and heard from the engineering professionals that reviewed this, and also from Hydro.
Yeah.
And if Hydro signed off on this project, and if they are on the hook to deal with it, thank you.
I'll start with hydro. It's not usual to get into questions about grid capacity in terms of hydro. Normally, we just are looking to find out where are their lines and for them to make sure that no one's going to be digging through their stuff. In this case, though, more than about a year ago, based on questions that were raised by residents and concern about what they were thinking of as brownouts or multiple power failures in the area, I did contact Hydro One, who do the grid distribution, and asked them, you know, if there was any concern with the additional density and if the grid could handle it. And they wrote back very quickly, no problems. I then followed up with a phone call to them and said, you know, this is the concern that we have. We want to make sure you understood the question. This isn't just a turn the crank question. We really want to make sure that you've done the analysis. They hung up and said, okay, we'll call you back. And then within a couple of weeks, contacted us again and said, no, there are no concerns.
Then with respect to the engineering?
With respect to the engineering, we actually have our engineer on the file here today, Darlene. So I think it might be best for her to answer any questions in detail.
So just in the interest of time, if we could have a brief statement about whether or not the city is satisfied with the water capacity engineering. I know that has been a really contentious issue in the neighborhood, and I just want to make sure that our engineering department is on the record of being satisfied with what they've got, because that's what the report says before me.
So what we actually have, if you turn to page 3 of the report, is an item that says, before introducing the necessary bills for City Council for enactment, City Council require the owner to submit to the Chief Engineer a functional servicing report to determine the stormwater runoff, sanitary flow, and water supply demand resulting from this development and whether there's adequate capacity. Normally what that means is we have your reports, we're willing to allow you to have the report go forward, but there may be some T's to cross and I's to dot. And whether they have been dotted by today or would be done before the bills go forward, I would need to ask Darlene.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, to speak, Deputy Mayor Howell, to speak.
Thank you, Chair Grimes. I have a number of motions to place that I think would be very helpful. So I will move the staff recommendations in the report, but I also wanted to go through with Rosemary, if you could put up number 1A, just in order. Okay, it's on the screen behind me. So loud and clear throughout this entire process, we've heard from the neighborhood residents, personal experience for myself moving through the neighborhood for various reasons, including taking my kids to baseball games. I appreciate the issues with traffic in and around this entire series of intersections around the collection of apartment buildings. So aside from the development that's before us, this motion asks the Transportation Services Department to come back to the Community Council and talk to us about how we can improve all of the configuration of the roadways there just to make it work better. Whether or not this place is built at that point in time is irrelevant. I think there's work that can be done today. Motion number 1B is another extremely sensitive issue. It's something that I hear over and over again. It is about parking, and I will submit, and I've said it publicly before, that Central Etobicoke streets don't have on-street parking. It's one of the characters that we have that defines our neighborhood. It's one of the ways that we set ourselves as suburban, not urban. And I think a lot of people are concerned about development, but I translate that to concern with urbanization of what we have in Central Etobicoke. And so in order to protect that, this motion changes the municipal bylaws so that somebody at 70 Dixfield in the new resident or the existing are no longer eligible to exercise an application for on-street parking. So that takes that out of the picture. This is not related to the construction. We're going to deal with that in a moment. But that should offer some comfort that if the developer felt, and I'm not saying this developer is, but the developer felt, you know, I'm going to build a few less parking spaces, and maybe we'll just let the residents figure it out and end up on the street in a few years. That's not going to happen. I don't support that, and I don't think anyone in the neighborhood would. The next motion, 1C, ups the game in the requirement with respect to having a communication plan with a couple of excellent organizations that I've dealt with. I've dealt with the DARA through Melanie, and I've dealt with YCC through Dana, sorry. And I think that communication plan and that relationship with the developer needs to continue. I also want to know where all the cars are going to go during the construction. And so I'm compelling, as part of the approval process, for those plans to be sorted out. And I can't hide the fact that at some point they will rip up the garage and we will have to deal with things on a temporary basis, but all of that will go back into an integral site at the end of it. But I think there should be a process to deal with all of this. And finally, also a communication plan for the existing residents in the building there, because they're going to be in a construction site. And finally, my last motion, 1D, the City of Toronto has a Good Neighbor Guide, which I left on my office desk, but it speaks to all of the relationship issues that occur, including noise, dust, water, all of those sorts of things that happen during construction. And to make the point about how important this is, I'm going to ask the clerk to actually provide a copy to the applicant as a symbolic gesture to say that we're going to be following the Good Neighbor Guide and all of the principles in it. So as the gentleman did speak to us about noise on a construction site, there are bylaws around that, and there is a process to deal with it, and I'm real serious about that. So, you know, the office of the councillor doesn't, and the role of the councillor doesn't stop at this point in time. The councillor has to see through all of the changes that are going to happen in the neighborhood, help integrate any development which has been proposed today into keeping this the best place possible, and working through a process to make sure that the construction goes as smoothly as possible. And that really just involves rolling up the sleeves and working with people. I realize that this has been a very difficult development for a lot of people. A lot of effort has been put into it through community representatives who really have rolled up their sleeves and gone through all of the details, and actually are continuing to do that because we have meetings set up beyond today to deal with all of these issues. I thank everybody for their interest in this matter. As issues come up, please make sure that you work through the contacts in the neighborhood or directly with the councillor's office. With that, I'll thank everybody for their effort on this, and look forward to working with you on it.
Question to the mover, Councillor Campbell.
Question, Rosemary, could you put number 2 up, 1B, please? So, I'm not really, so...
Over there, Councillor Campbell, you can see it on the screen.
Yeah, I can see it there. There too. Shall not accept applications from residents of or visitors to trades for a permit. So, does this mean, tradespeople are supposed to apply for a permit, and this is saying we're not to accept applications?
Correct. Under the current Municipal Code 925, which deals with on-street parking, and I will add that I worked with the parking staff to create this, anybody at any given time can make an application for on-street parking anywhere in the area.
Where are the tradespeople to go?
During the construction plan, we will be able to manage that through an interim parking plan. But if somebody wanted to Chapter 925 process to get a temporary on-street parking permit or even a long-term parking permit, they have been excluded. And that particular listing of tradesperson was under the advice of parking staff.
That's good.
Good motion, Councillor Hawley. Okay, so seeing no further speakers, I think we can take all 4 of those as a package, agreed? And ask for recorded vote on all of them. All in favor? Councillor DeGiorgio, Councillor Doucette, Councillor Grimes, Deputy Mayor Holiday, Councillor DeChannel, and Councillor Campbell. That carries.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just go on to our next item. We need it. Items amended, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, 31.8, request for direction report, 240 Markland Drive, zoning bylaw amendment application. We have a number of speakers, but we'll just wait till the room clears out and our new constituents come in.
That's noise.
Okay, we call the meeting back to order. So we have a number of speakers here, and the way it looks here, if everyone's used their 5 minutes, we're probably here for an hour and a half at least. So please listen to what other people are saying and try not to repeat what other deputies are saying. Our first speaker, Eugene Olslovic. Did I get him come close?
That again?
Eugene, you're Markland Woods Homeowners Association?
I live in Markland Woods, yes.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Oleksiuk.
Welcome,
Good
sir.
Irish name.
Good evening, you have 5 minutes, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. After listening to the other people, I kind of made my notes, I switched my notes around, so I'm going to try and do it really quick. I live at 35 Sun Plains Crescent. I'm right in the middle where they're going to put in the 29 units. When they first started, they were called townhouses. Now they're called units. Before I get into that, on Bloor Street, they're going to build a 9-story unit. And from what I understand is the parking going into that unit is only accessible coming from the east on Bloor Street. So therefore, if anybody's working in the Toronto area and coming west, they have to turn south on Mill Road, cut along Broadview, and pass my house to go back to Markland and back to Bloor Street to get onto that entrance.
Sir, can I hold your time for 1 second? Sorry. Can we get those doors closed, please, or ask people to move further down? No, stop, no. Yeah. Please, just give me a break. Yeah, we got a long evening here, so we got to move on. We're going to have the doors closed.
Do I get an extra minute for that?
I've stopped your time. We close the doors, please. No, you can't do that, okay? No, because you can't. Okay. Okay, sorry, Eugene, floor's back, sorry.
Okay, so that means there's going to be around 200 cars going past my house to get into the entrance on Bloor Street. Now, in regards to the 29 units that are going in front of me, there's 3 houses on that block. There's 33, 35, and 37, which are single-family dwellings. At one time, there was 14 people living in those 3 houses. When you put those 29 units in front of me, there is going to be 8 3-bedroom and 21 2-bedroom, which is approximately 74 people crammed into the same space that are 3 units that are facing our houses, which are right now 7 people living in those 3 houses versus 74 people that are living across the street from me. With those 29 units, there's going to be 29 cars plus another 10 because some people have 2 cars, which is going to be over 40 cars coming in around Sun Plains into the garage. Now, the problem here is a lot of people work in the city, and there's only one subway line, or sorry, one bus line going along Bloor Street, and it's not a very reliable one. So everybody's going to take their own cars to work, which means more traffic going past my house, our house. Now, when those buildings are going to be constructed, I'm going to call it a mini village because of all the people there. There's going to be 4 to 6 years of construction in front of me, which means 4 to 6 years of noise, traffic, and a lot of inconvenience to me. There is going to be, now what I want to know is how the parking situation is going to be when that construction goes up. When the construction goes up, that means a lot of traffic in front of my place, but how is the garbage and the snow going to be removed when there's construction trucks going in and out, cars parked in front of my house? It's not viable to me. Just give me 1 second here. Now, when those townhouses go up, 29 units go up, does that mean my taxes are going to go up or my taxes going to go down? There's 3 words in the real estate business, which is location, location, location. People do not want to move in to my house if I want to sell it to get away from that construction. It's going to be difficult for me to construct or sell the house. It's going to be difficult for me to rent the house. Is there going to be a compensation for me for that? Not just from the city, but from the builder. The solution to that is, number one, don't build it. Number two, take that complex in front of me and move it to Bloor Street, where it won't affect Sun Plains, or it won't affect the parking situation. Now, on Bloor and Mill Road, there was townhouses going up a few years ago that went up in flames twice. There was a complex being built, townhouses being built at Fieldgate and Bermanthorpe that went up in flames as well. I want to know what kind of guarantee that the builder's going to give me that these townhouses being built in front of me are not going to go up in flames as well. And if it does happen, does my insurance take care of the house that's going to burn down if flames come to me, or is the builder going to do it? The parking, or the traffic that's going to amount to me, there's only three of us houses onto that stretch of Sun Plains, which is going to be the most inconvenienced of all, because that's where traffic is going. We have 2 apartment buildings that use that little stretch to get to the plaza, and when those the complex is going to be built, not only the 9-story townhouse, or 9-story building that's going up on Bloor Street, plus the units in front of me, will be taking Broadfield and Sun Plains to get into their units, which is more traffic going past me. It's going to be between 200 to 300 cars going past me during rush hour in the morning and during rush hour in the evening.
Please wrap up, so you're out of time. Thank you.
All right.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you, sir. Our next deputy, Patricia Allen. Patricia Allen? You come together? Perfect. Yeah. Good evening, welcome. And you might want to pull that mic just up a little bit, but welcome, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi. We've written numerous letters about this project, but the feedback is not forthcoming, and we have not even acknowledged receipt for that matter. Maybe that's common practice. We would like to take a much simpler approach to the Sun Plains building. We live on Sun Plains, 33 Sun Plains. And hopefully we'll get feedback for all our neighbors. We would like to ask only 2 things for the Sun Plains building, both of which should not cost any more than the original plans indicate. Firstly, when making application to amend the zoning code with regard to 240 Markland, in your table of site-specific bylaws, we think the reference is Chapter 324. Please indicate all frontage use on Sun Plains in the building site-specific bylaws written application. Include what exactly is specific to the units, the yards, the balconies, the porches, and what is common front yardage to the building. Also, what common uses of the front yards can or cannot be, we would like to see. For what is undertaken by the unit holders, can they have or have not barbecues, for instance? Can they have flags, or could there be a write-up on this? Sports equipment or not? I mean, of course, if the kids had a basketball hoop or a hockey net, there's no argument there, just encouragement. But please indicate also where trees will be planted, and further to that, could we have more mature trees planted rather than seedlings? That's something we'd like to see. And maybe this could all be defined in that bylaw application. Not certain, but hopefully it can be. Okay, as a family who've lived on Sun Plains for approximately 30 years, we've enjoyed the green space, the green view, and same as that from our neighbors' front yards, with mature, majestic trees, even hawks nesting across the road from us. Children, both ours and 240 Markland residents, have enjoyed this space, playing catch, tobogganing, dog walking. It's been a terrific amenity for us and our neighbors all these years. As we say, there's only 3 houses on the street across from this. So secondly, we do not feel it would greatly affect your property plans if we were to push back the Sun Plains property offset from the plan, say the minimum 6 meters north to 10 meters. Property exists there. Please consider this as a paramount request from the Sun Plains neighbors and a goodwill gesture from the planners to the Sun Plains owners. This should not impact your Sun Plains building whatsoever. A construction parking plan would greatly be appreciated also. Are the Sun Plains houses going to experience an across-street parking lot for 2 years of construction for the main building, and then another 2 years of construction of the Sun Plains building? We would have a 4 to 5 year impact, far greater than anyone else in the area. Further reason to compensate us on Sun Plains with a bit more setback, say the 6 meters minimum to 10 meters. I mean, what's 4 meters amongst friends, right? What we have presented here is viable, cost-effective to your interests and all parties. We would please like an answer to the Sun Plains properties with a written answer in the not-too-distant future. That's 33, 35, 37 Sun Plains, and that would be greatly appreciated if we could have an answer to those questions. We thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Seeing no questions, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Bill Weingard. Good evening, Mr. Weingard. Welcome. And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of council. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to talk about two things. One is the apartment block, proposed 3-story apartment block on Sun Plains, and the other, if I have time, about the parking situation. My wife Sandy and I live at 23 Sun Plains Crescent. We're 4 doors away from the redevelopment site that's proposed here. And one of the features of the staff report was the references to the official plan policies that govern the redevelopment of the apartment site, and the insistence on what the words like fit in with, respect, and improve the surrounding neighborhood. In our view, the proposed apartment block doesn't do a good job of doing that, and I think there's a fairly simple solution for that so that it would do it better. When we look out our window on our street, we see houses across the street that have all the stories are owned by the same people. They're owned houses. There's an ownership interest in them. There is a front yard. People walk out. We say hello when people come out the door, and so on. It's a good little neighborhood. What the proposal seems to indicate is that there would be balconies, except on the first floor of the proposed block. There would be balconies in the back of the buildings, essentially, which is contrary to what we experience. And there would be rental units. We think that it would be the fairly simple solution to that is to ask for, albeit 6-meter frontages instead of 16 meters like the houses. So intensification we accept, no problem there. But to look for the 3 stories to be all part of the same dwelling unit, same home, and for with a reasonable setback that would be consistent with the neighborhood, and where there would be a condominium, those would be condominium also, so there's an ownership interest, so that people who live there have an interest, as we do, in the look of the neighborhood and in the participation in the activities of the neighborhood. I say, just to be clear, I don't think, and I think talking to Pat and Carson, I think they would have no objection to an actual, townhouse, as we know it, that was owned in condominium format, and where we actually had new neighbors. I think it'd be, as Carson said, there are certainly some beautiful trees on the property across the street, but we do understand the desire of the owner to make some other use. Let me just quickly talk about, those small changes I think would be consistent with the intent of the official plan, and without, I guess, the changes to the proposed agreement, we would see that the official plan intent had not been met. Talk quickly about parking. We have a fairly quiet street, not a lot of traffic, and we know that because people use it for parking instruction, with the parking schools, or driving schools all the time. So people are backing in and out of driveways and learning to parallel park and so on. So it means it's a quiet street. This proposal will increase the traffic, so be it. I mean, recognize that's gonna happen. The issue is with parking on both sides of the road. We're already starting to see, on our little section of street, we don't see that very often, and it doesn't matter because it's so lightly used. As it becomes more intensively used, and as we have inadequate parking on the proposed site, then we run the risk, I think, of having both sides of the street. And then we do have a problem, safety, inconvenience, and so on the street. Our sense of we're talking about, let me see, I have the numbers here, 362 parking spaces provided for 268 units. I think that's not going to be enough for reasons that have been given both the previous application and by Pat and Carson as well. And then we end up with a situation where we have a street essentially plugged, particularly during the winter and particularly during construction. And I think that's something that would need avoided. We, rather than pester the bylaw people full-time to try and get cars moved, the obvious answer is to provide more parking on the site.
We have a quick question from Deputy Mayor Halliday.
Thank you for speaking to us. I don't know if you saw in the last development that came up, I moved a motion which would exclude the privilege of applying for on-street parking for people at this address, the address of the development. Would that be something you would support?
It may be that we've started over the last few years to have a bit of a parking problem on both sides of the street, further down in front of Pat and Carson and then on Markland Drive. That's fairly recent. It was news to me when I saw your motion that people had actually applied for permits to do that. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't.
They have not.
But now all of a sudden we do have both sides of the street quite commonly. Not so much up our side, the other side of Broadfield. I think it's likely to happen without permits, I guess, is the conclusion I draw.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Michael Georgopoulos. Good evening, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors and staff. I'm Michael Georgopoulos, and I'm a resident of Markland Wood, living in the northeast quadrant of Markland at 21 Causeway Court. You're probably asking yourselves, why would I be concerned about a potential development that is being planned on the other side of Markland? Well, I've been following this proposal since 2011 when it was first brought to the community's attention as an 18-story development tower proposal. My concern with the proposal, like everyone else's at the time, was that there was no compatibility and fit within the physical character of our community. I, like many residents, believe that this is still the case, and with the most recent proposal, even though planning staff seem to disagree. While the applicant has come a long way since his original proposal and has tried to accommodate the requests of the community, many of my neighbors believe that there is still room for further revision, not only to benefit the entire community, but him as well. This shouldn't be construed as nitpicking by our community, and definitely not telling him to go away. We understand that the applicant has every right to build on his property, but he should do so taking into consideration his location in an already established community. We are simply asking for 2 further amendments to his current proposal, that being the overall height of the Bloor building be reduced by 1 story, and additional terracing be added to the south end of the building, starting with the 7th floor. You'll hear more to that later this evening. Specific to the first point, this request is being made because of the precedent-setting nature of this application. Both the applicant and planning both know that it's a precedent-setting development, not only for a community, but Ward 3 as well. And that's why Community Council needs to take the lead in ensuring that this project is done right. The applicant will argue that losing a floor and additional terracing will cost him greatly, but this won't be the case, as we're not asking him to cut it in half. We wish we could. Currently, including his application, there are 8 building applications in Ward 3 that involve infill tower development within an existing community. Of these 8, only 1 abuts a residential area, and surprisingly, it almost mirrors the 240 site plan exactly. The other 7 involve towers of smaller scale buildings within an apartment area and or abutting major highways and roadways, and not a residential community such as ours. Surprisingly, the application I'm referring to is located at 60 Dixfield Drive, which you just had the opportunity to listen to. And the reason I bring it up is because for this development, the applicant has chosen to infill with 4 structures, a 6-story building and 3 3-story buildings. Why is this relevant? It's relevant because it involves an applicant that is trying to fit his development within an existing community, and in doing so, he's able to do so at a much smaller scale and still maintain profitability. So while this is proof that such a development can be accomplished, we are from a build, but not obviously from a traffic fit, as you've already heard tonight. We're not demanding that the applicant change his entire proposal. We're only making two simple requests that will allow this proposal to fit better within our community and lessen the impact it will have on the residents near it. Doing so will make him a true neighbor. We therefore respectfully ask all the councillors present tonight to support us as a community and vote in favor of our two requested amendments in order to ensure that this first major development in our community fits properly and sets a workable precedent for any future similar developments, not only within our community, but also Ward 3. We also trust that any further questions to the applicant, be it tonight or further after this evening, include the many points I made earlier tonight in regards to the 70 Dixfield property. In particular, parking impact. A repeat of the motions made for parking at 70 Dixfield would be appreciated for our development as well. Stormwater capabilities. Councillor Hawley is well aware of these stormwater issues that we had and the flooding we've had in our community a few years back. Most importantly, and he's well aware of this as well, increased traffic impact on the community. Speeding is a huge issue, and the density and the number of vehicles coming down our streets are incredible, especially on Bloor Street. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have a question, Councillor Campbell?
Just one quick question. With it, given that there's a 10-story building on the site and there's two 13-story buildings nearby, why do you feel that this is precedent setting at 9 stories? Well,
it's precedent setting because what we've heard from city planning is the development is always looked at individually. They don't concern any future development, be it in the same block, in the same neighborhood, whatever. So what we're looking at is if the building is allowed to go taller than the existing building, the next development, and there's potential for at least 3 to 4 properties to being developed in our community right around that one, that will set a precedent, and every development after the fact will be taller and taller than the existing buildings.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense.
Well, the only thing is, it's not taller than the existing building.
What's that?
At 9 stories, it's not taller than the existing building.
Correct, and we're trying to keep it at that level as a minimum, like as a maximum build for that.
Okay. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, and there's a podium, I get it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next deputant, Doug Ferries. Good evening, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
So I live down at 34 Markland Drive, and I drive down on Markland Drive, and every night there is 30 or 40 cars that are parked there. And not only the cars, but when you drive down in the daytime, there's rubbish out front. So my thing, we talk about probability, and if they can't manage the units that they have there right now, why would we assume that we give them more units that they're gonna be able to manage the parking? So like I just took a picture here. This was last night. There was 42 cars parked on the road, both sides. And again, we look at, somebody was speaking before and they talked about probabilities. If you can't manage what you have now, why would you give somebody more and think they're gonna do a better job? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Next deputant is Georgina Velasquez. Huh? Oh, I thought I recognized the name. Good evening, Georgie. Could you just pull that down a little bit? I'm sure you don't. Welcome. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, councillors, staff, and fellow Marklanders. We appreciate your support. I would like to thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you about the rezoning application for 240 Markland Drive. I live at 239 Markland Drive, which is diagonally across the street at Bloor. I'm Georgina Velasquez, and I'm the president of the Markland Wood Homeowners Association. We represent approximately 1,300 homeowners. We are a volunteer, not-for-profit community organization. We have been in existence for almost 60 years, and many politicians have described us as one of the most active and well-organized group in the GTA. We have a long history of dedicated and involved directors. We publish a monthly newsletter, the Marklander, which keeps all the residents informed about issues that may affect our community. We have several internal committees analyzing and advocating for public safety, traffic safety, government relations, airport matters, social events, student scholarships, the Christmas caravan, and finally, a special committee formed in 2011 for this specific rezoning proposal. Our residents are proud of their community and are committed to maintaining it as a wonderful place to live. The principles governing our association are the following three. 1, to protect and promote the interests of the Markland Wood area of the City of Toronto. 2, to further the orderly development of Markland Wood in such manner as to preserve and enhance the area. 3, to create, foster, and maintain a community spirit in Markland Wood. Let me now direct our attention to the rezoning application for 240 Markland Drive. The MWHA has been closely monitoring this development proposal since 2011, as well as all the subsequent revised application as noted in the city planning documents. Since 2011, based upon residents' requests, we retained a professional urban planner to advise us on this matter. We have held 4 community meetings with attendance of well over 250 residents each time. We participated with residents in community consultation meetings. As well, we conducted 2 community surveys on what we in Markland Wood wanted to see on this site. There was a significant rate of return of the surveys, and there will be another speaker who will discuss those surveys in detail. The community has been continuously informed of everything that the MWHA has been doing with regards to this rezoning application. We have maintained continuous communication with our councillor and deputy mayor, Stephen Holliday, and we appreciate his support and his commitment to us in terms of meeting with us and talking to us on, whenever we asked of that. We have convened many meetings with the city planning department. We would like to come to a resolution with the developer by reiterating the same final 2 requested points that you will hear tonight quite often, that we as a community have repeated requests to the city planning department, and that tonight we respectfully request that you as councillors adopt the staff report with the amendment requested in our June 4th letter, which is in your package. We see the motion as a settlement that is endorsed by our board of directors and consists of 2 parts. A, reducing the height of the building, and you have already heard that. We are very concerned that a taller building is not appropriate for the site, and anything taller would set a very dangerous precedent for the other apartment properties in the area. There are currently 5 apartment buildings in Markland Wood, and that includes 240 Markland. And then incorporating terracing on the south side of the building so our neighbors on those streets do not look at a concrete slab. Our planner, who is here tonight, will speak further to these 2 points when he makes his presentation. As you know, the applicant has filed an appeal with what used to be called the Ontario Municipal Board, which is now LAPAT. We want to inform you that we, the association, have notified LAPAT that we have asked for party status. We are here to represent the community, and we are here to see this through. However, we would like to come to a satisfactory resolution in partnership with the city. We ask for your support of the motion and the amendment, and we thank you for your consideration. Thank you again.
Right on 5 minutes. Professional. Right on 5 minutes. You have a question? Deputy Mayor Holliday, question?
Couldn't have timed it better.
Roll right on 5 minutes. I like that.
My apologies. I'm an educator. I talk a lot.
Thank you for speaking to us, Madam President. I wanted to just make sure that my colleagues understood, because I know the association well and all the work that we've done together.
Yes.
You represent how many people again?
Approximately 1,300, just under 1,300 homeowners.
1,300, and we're gonna learn more, but do you believe you come before us with a mandate, really, from the constituents of the association?
Yes,
And you've been very clear with us with your request in your letter.
yes.
Okay, and, thank you. That's very
Thank
helpful.
you.
Thank you. Catherine McLarty. Catherine, welcome, good evening. I want to lift that mic up just a bit.
I think that should be good. Good evening. So my name is Catherine McLarty, and I'm here as a concerned resident of Markland Wood, and I'm speaking to you tonight as the president of the townhouse condominium, Tyne Terrace, the next door neighbor of 240 Markland Drive. Tyne Terrace is a collection of 60 attached townhomes in 3 different buildings with an entrance and a common corridor, as well as private backyard and patio space, along with extensive green common space and gardens. Technically, as you enter the townhomes off a common hallway, they are maisonettes or small homes with windows on only one side of the units. The complex was built in 1964-65 by John Ferracuti, who's here this evening. The architect was Joseph Kelton, most known for the Guild Inn in Scarborough, which unfortunately no longer exists, but was quite famous in its day. Like many townhouse complexes built in the 60s, Tyne Terrace is in need of a little bit of TLC, but those lucky enough to live there know that it's a diamond in the rough, just waiting to show the neighborhood how special and smart looking it can be. Tyne Terrace is my home, and our homes, yours and mine, have a special place in our hearts. It's where we feel safe, where we relax, where we create memories with our family, and where we sleep and recuperate to face the next hectic day in our busy lives. And our neighborhood is an extension of that home. It's where we walk our dogs, go to the park with our children, jog, walk, cycle, and watch our children play. Our neighborhood, Markland Wood, is a very special place to live. It's in older suburban Etobicoke, known for its green spaces and water courses. We have a neighborhood association which acts on our behalf to make sure our neighborhood is welcoming and safe. They keep us informed of what's happening in the neighborhood, such as the proposed GTAA increase in air traffic, which thankfully, after a lot of hard work by a lot of people and support from all levels of government, has been avoided. Now I realize that nothing stays the same, and the Ontario Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe calls for intensification of existing built areas, and that Etobicoke Centre is identified as one of those locales for this intensification. I would just like to remind the Council that Markland Wood is at the furthest, most western point of the area, bordering on Mississauga, and that Bloor Street from Kipling to Mississauga has no infill developments greater than 4 stories, being primarily a residential road with single-family homes, townhomes, and supporting strip mall structures. When a sign was posted on 240 Markland Drive that a development proposal was in the works, you can be sure that the neighbors of Tyne Terrace took notice. What would the proposed development look like? Presumably a 3 or 4 stories building or set of buildings. Not so, a huge tower block of 18 stories soaring into the skies. I would have thought that should a developer, together with city planning, see merit in adding a new building at 240 Markland, at least its height should be limited to the average of the existing apartment building height on the west and the height of Tyne Terrace to the east to comply with the smooth transition planning principle. As president of Tyne Terrace, this would have been my choice, both for our complex and the neighborhood as a whole. Stacked executive townhomes of 4 stories, along with a 4-story 1- and 2-bedroom condominium with plenty of green space, gardens, and setbacks from the smaller residential streets with respect to those homes. Now that would have fit nicely into Markland Wood. Unfortunately, I know that that is not the proposal before you today, and I'm also aware that all of the hard work that's gone on this project by the Markland Woods Homes Associations, especially those on the committee, city planning, as well as the hard work and many hours spent on this file by Councillor Holiday. At 240 Markland Drive community meeting at Silverthorne Collegiate, I specifically asked Councillor Holiday if he would allow the precedent of a tall building, a building that taller than the existing apartment building now on site, to be built at 240 Markland Drive. And he would reply that he would not allow that precedent to be set. I would like to thank Councillor Holiday for staying the course and working hard to avoid that precedent. The Marklandwood Homes Association has proposed an amendment to the city planning proposal which prevents such a height precedent. It is to reduce the height of the Bloor Street building by 1 floor and add terracing to its south side. Tyne Terrace supports these amendments because reducing the height of this building by 1 story and terracing the south side of the building will increase the sunlight to the homes near the new build. As previously mentioned, our homes have windows on only one side. Blocking the sunlight of these windows makes a huge difference to our homeowners, as does reducing the amount of sunlight to their gardens, and the homeowners of Tyne Terrace love their backyards and their gardens, which in many cases they have spent years developing and nurturing.
You're up, please, you're out of time.
In addition to the proposed amendment, Tyne Terrace would also like to see the setback of the Broadfield townhouses increased to 10 meters, which I'm sure our neighbors on Broadfield Drive would appreciate. And again, at this time, I ask the council to vote against the report from City Planning unless it is inclusive of the proposed amendment. And in conclusion, I would just like to say that should we be faced with another development such as this, I would think that the developer, planning, government, representatives, and the community can come together to do a much better job to find a more appropriate and livable addition to Markland Wood. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Peter Swinton.
Mr. Chairman, members of Community Council, my name is Peter Swinton. I'm the planning consultant who has been advising the Marklandwood Homeowners Association on this application since January 2013. In my presentation, I will focus on the official plan and ask Council to reflect on the implication of certain policies, and I will support the recommendation of the MWHA in the letter that you've received. Firstly, I'll take you to Official Plan Policy 4.2.2a, Development in apartment neighborhoods, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, will locate and mass new buildings to provide a transition between areas of different development intensity and scale through, in part, a stepping down of height towards lower scale neighborhoods. In the role of council is to interpret and determine compliance with its official plan. The policy is clear that the low-scale neighborhood is the thing to transition to, but the questions before council today are, what is the height that new infill should transition from, and what constitutes appropriate transition? In the March 2011 planning report that accompanied the first submission, it stated in response to this policy that building massing steps back to create a transition to the south and east responding to adjacent lower scale development. It also steps back to the west responding to the height of the existing 10-story building, and concluded that in their opinion it was consistent with the plan policies of the official plan. So the applicant's position was that so long as the building provided transition with in its own massing, it complied with the OP. It didn't matter that the building at the time was 15 stories, 48.7 meters tall. It was 1.75 times, 1 3/4 times the height of the existing building there today, and they felt that that complied. It wasn't until 4.5 years and 3 submissions later that the applicant proposed anything close to the height of the existing building, and that's the same height that's before Community Council today. It's a height, even though it's 9 stories, it's a height that is has the main roof 1 meter or more taller than the existing building, and a mechanical penthouse that is larger in area, and 1 additional story, about 3 meters taller than the mechanical penthouse on the existing building. In the current proposal, the building facing Broadfield Drive goes straight up to its full height above the 3-story townhouse base. I believe that I believe that it does not meet the intent of transition for the Broadfield residents and for the people on the street to see such a large slab end of the building 10 meters from the street line. And the afternoon shadows on the rear yards of Tyne Terrace would be reduced if the end of the building were terraced down and the height was reduced by 1 story. Council needs to ask itself, should a building located between a 27.7 meter apartment building and a 2-story townhouse and singles be taller than that building, or should it transition down in height from that apartment building? Should a slab building
that's located 10 meters from the street go straight up 6 stories above the 3-story base, or would terracing at the top better improve that transition to the neighborhood? If you approve the staff recommendations to support the appeal, you are saying that it's council's opinion that it's okay to transition up before transitioning down. I want each of you to think about Tower and the Park apartment sites within your own ward, and to understand that should you support this official plan interpretation, the question will not be, is it appropriate to be taller? The question will be, how much taller is appropriate? Also needs to be considered in relation to larger official plan policies. Significant growth is intended for the mixed-use areas designations in the centers and the avenues. The site is not designated mixed-use areas, and Bloor Street in this area is not an avenue. In the apartment designation policy 4.2.3 says significant growth is generally not intended within developed apartment neighborhoods. The avenues and mid-rise guidelines referred to in the staff report speak to the maximum amount of development on avenues, which are intensification areas. The proposed development exceeds the height recommended in the mid-rise guidelines, even though the site is not an intensification area. In my opinion, the proposal does not conform to these apartment neighborhood policies. But in my opinion, the change required for the building to comply is not significant. I recommend that council amend recommendation 1 of the staff report and support the development, but only with a reduction in height of 1 story and with the terracing to the south end of the building. In conclusion, it's understandable that individuals we are hearing from today will have different opinions, but the MWHA recommendations are a result of a well-considered position of the board and has been taken out and well discussed and communicated with the broader community, and has, from my experience of the meetings, a broad endorsement from the community. They reflect a reasonable compromise, and I would request that you amend the staff recommendations in support of the MWHA.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next, our next deputy, Richard Bohinky. Thank you. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Good evening, and particularly Councillor Holiday. My name is Richard Bohinky, Richard Banky in English, and I just want to fully support the proposal of the Markland Wood Homeowners Association and the 2 amendments they suggest. I think I was 5 years old when this issue first came to the board. And now I'm 77, and sure enough, we still haven't resolved it. An awful lot of work has gone on this. These are reasonable requests. They are not ill thought out. They really have involved the entire community, and I heartily ask that you endorse them and make sure it happens, because it is precedent setting, and it's an ugly precedent. It isn't one that's nice and charming, and wouldn't it be ducky if we all had something like that next door? No, it wouldn't be ducky at all, and Tyne Terrace does need to break from this potentiality. So, thank you.
You have a question from your councillor, but we want your real age. You're not 77.
Yeah, how old do you think I was when it started? Richard, you've been involved with the association and on many files through the neighborhood and work with a lot of people. Would you say that the sentiment and the representation by the association is reflective of the feelings within the community?
Without question, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nancy Rakowski? Nancy here? Oh, there she is. Hi, Nancy. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, city planners and staff and city councilors, for this opportunity to express our concerns about the oversized development at 240 Markland. I feel like David versus Goliath, but as a Markland homeowner, I am one of the almost 1,300 Davids that are fighting this development. I was very attracted to Markland. I left the Kingsway to come here. It's in a beautiful neighborhood with mature trees, green spaces, well-kept homes, private driveways, spaces between homes. I could have bought a house in other areas much cheaper. but I went for Markland. I'm very happy, and I love it here. Markland, Georgina, I have your speech. Markland provides a monthly newsletter. We've kept informed. We have eco events, family events. We have festival celebrations. We have scholarships. We don't just get together to rally around a problem. We get together, and it's from the 60s, and it's continuous. Yes, I admit that it's not all single-dwelling homes. There are 2 rows of townhouses. There's an apartment to the north and east of 240. There's other apartments at Mill Road near Burnhamthorpe, which impacts very few private homes because there's a big school there. And the one at Mill and Bloor have neighbors of a park and a school, so they don't impact private homes either. But you can't legitimately call Markland an apartment neighborhood. The low density is one of the factors that raises our home values, and it is appeal to the buyers here. The landlords have been in this neighborhood. They've owned that building from sometime in the 70s, and they've done nothing to reflect the aesthetic appeal of Markland. I know when the pool was closed, people say that they took the dirt from the gas station at Bloor and Mill when they were building those townhouses, so I'd like a soil sample taken of the fill that's in that pool before anything goes ahead. They also have beautiful original Markland trees, which is important to all Markland residents. 15 of them have those little silver tags, so maybe that should be noted, and you look at the tree proposal for their build. Oops. I live south of Bloor, and when I'm coming from the west home, I never go down Markland Road. It's less congested if I use Mill Road South. And you have to consider that Mill Road has Dollarama, McDonald's, TD Bank, a medical center, a few stores, but it's always less congested. So don't drive on Markland even as it is. There's other issues around our neighborhood. We are in the flooding study area 38. We can't keep up with our infrastructure right now with the existing buildings, and I wonder if even with future construction it can handle 164 more units than there are now. On the west side of Markland, there's also the floodplain, which was established through Hurricane Hazel, so it's very close to that, and I think that should have extra consideration. But here's the good news. We have an answer to this development. It's called the bylaws. The bylaws exist to help all of us. They're fair and equal to all of us. They've been here for years since the first proposals. The developers just don't like them because they're not going to make as much money as they want. So the other people have spoken maybe more officially, but Bloor is 27 meters wide, so a new building should not be higher than that height, and that should include the equipment on the roof for air conditioning and all that. The proposed density of 164 new units expected the growth along this part of Bloor and is in stark contrast to the almost 1,300 private homes. I believe that current bylaws would allow them to increase the number of resident units by 1. Build it. The 45-degree angle that the developer used to establish the height of the new buildings, he took the border of the townhouses on the east, and on the south side he went across the street to the, and I don't understand how he can do that legitimately. I don't understand all the details, but I understand greed.
You wrap up, Nancy, please, you're out of time.
Okay. So city planners, the decision you make tonight affects 2 developers who are after money who do not live in the neighborhood and 1,300 private homeowners. The damage is permanent. It's not just a temporary construction. We can all live through that. We won't like it. It's the permanent devaluation, the change in the density of Markland Woods. It's an upscale neighborhood. It's not quite the same as others. Please consider that.
Thank you, Nancy. Mark Creedon, please. Mark Creedon, next speaker. Oh, I got Mark Creedon. We have to write.
Good evening. My name is Chris Creedon, and I'm here on behalf of my husband, who unfortunately was unable to attend tonight. I'm going to present a letter which he has written. Dear Etobicoke and York councillors, I am concerned about 3 things related to the owner's latest proposal for zoning changes to his 240 Markland Drive property. 1, height. 2, insufficient cascading on the east and south parts of the proposed condominium apartment structure. And 3, the use of stacked apartments on sun plains rather than of townhouses. I will concentrate on height and the very important issue of precedent. The current proposal for the tallest structure at 240 Markland Drive West is 1 meter higher than the existing apartment buildings. This may seem trivial to you, but is actually of major importance. What you instruct your legal department to do regarding the OMB hearing will set a precedent. The owner of all the apartment buildings on Bloor and the owner of the McDonald's Plaza will all be watching you. If the City Planning Department gives a positive report for this proposal, and you, the councillors, do not direct your legal department to oppose this position at the OMB, then what is to stop the owners of all of these other properties to ask for further adjustments to their current zoning restrictions and propose even higher structures to be built on the parking lots adjacent to their buildings? There have to be rational limits. When the Markland Wood Homeowner Association raised the precedent-setting nature of the 240 Markland proposal, the City Planning Department staff confessed that they only examined one site application at a time and thus had not considered the likelihood of the owners of the other properties making similar applications. I was shocked when they made such an admission. Considering the growth plans of the province and the City of Toronto, anyone can see that growth over the next dozen years will be vertical. I am angered that the urban planners that are paid through my taxes can't or won't consider the significance of precedent. I ask that as elected officials, you not make the same error as the bureaucrats in the planning department. I ask you to show courage and leadership in voting against the 240 Markland Drive proposal, even if the City of Toronto Planning Department gives it a positive report. Please stand up for the families in Markland Wood. Thank you in advance. Respectfully, Mark Creedon.
Hannah Schaefer. Hannah? Anna, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
So I'm going to apologize because you've heard all this a million times tonight, but that's what happens when you're number 13. Good evening, councillors, and thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Anna Schaefer, and I've lived in Markland Wood for 23 years. It has been an amazing community to raise my family in, and I look forward to living here for another 23 years, God willing. I am here today to make this deputation regarding 240 Markland because not only is it in my backyard, it is in my neighbors' backyards, and here in Markland Wood, we are a circle of friends. According to the official plan, 240 Markland is not an avenue, and the original proposed development back in 2011 was not aligned with the intent of growth and density put forth by municipal policies. For example, developments in apartment neighborhoods, namely our towers in the park adjacent to Markland Homes, will be compatible with our neighborhood, provide gradual transition of scale density through the stepping down of buildings towards and setback from our neighborhood, maintain enough light and privacy for our existing residents, and pay close attention to resulting traffic and parking impacts on our neighborhood so as not to diminish the residential amenity of Markland Wood. Today we have come a long way from that original proposal. As your planning department stated in 2013, the redevelopment of 240 Markland is a challenging project because of the location of the existing building on the site. A workable scheme which respects the surrounding neighborhood and produces a project of good quality, is not impossible, but will require creative design solutions. I would like to reiterate that even though we have come a long way in the last 7 years, the term respect to the surrounding neighborhood has not been acknowledged in any discussions or deemed an important factor in any decisions made or proposed. By respect, I am referring to the height of this new building, the cascading we seek, and the interference this project will inevitably have on our lives. This new building cannot be higher than the existing building. We have 4 other apartment properties in our community, a golf club and a plaza. This would set a precedent to all these properties if this rezoning of height was allowed. The reduction in height may seem irrelevant to all of you, but it would be disrespectful to all of us knowing that this could happen 6 more times in our community. Within our circle, we have a little community called Tyne Terrace. These were built as maisonettes. These little homes are right next door to 240 Markland. They don't want to lose their sunlight, nor do they want to stare at a brick wall. The respectful solution would be to accommodate the existing Marklanders. After all, they were there first. Respectfully, this development should not interfere negatively with our daily lives. Obviously, we will all have to make an adjustment, but our compromises should be minimal, and the developer seeking to interfere with our neighborhood should be made aware of the responsibilities associated with such a grand project in our midst. Please consider these suggestions. In November 2002, City Council adopted the following. Most of Toronto is already built with at least 1 generation of buildings. Future development will be built on infill and redevelopment sites and will need to fit in, respecting and improving the character of the surrounding area. Please respect Markland Wood. Thank you.
Next applicant, John Ferracuti. Good evening, Mr. Ferracuti, how are you?
Couldn't be better,
Are
thank
you
you.
Ramo's brother? Ramo?
Yes, I am.
There you go. Welcome, Mr. Ferracuti. Good to see you. You have 5 minutes. 15. You had to know Ramo. His brother's a great man. Anyways.
Good evening. I moved in this area 1956, and I remember something vivid. Coming west on Dundas, crossing the Humber River, there was a large billboard. And the billboard said, "Welcome to Etobicoke, first planned community in North America." And since then, I've noticed and appreciated and took part of the development of Etobicoke. And it has followed planning, good architecture, and sensible development. There has been a few applications made in Etobicoke to rezone, and I'll bring up the Humber Plaza attempt, and we all know what happened there. We did have a rezoning right in Markland when the gas station became obsolete and really not compatible with the area. The property was sold, and a developer proposed a very attractive townhouse project. And today, the values of those townhouses have gone up appreciably because the job was so well done. And I want to tell you, something that bothers me is that we built 4340 Bloor Street West in 1963. In 1964, it was occupied. 65 brought along the Strip Plaza, the Maisonettes, and in 66, they were finished along with 240. And there was a first in planning with the Maisonettes and 240. And that was the planning staff of Etobicoke suggested that a site plan be prepared and be reviewed by the planning department, and that a landscape architect be hired to design the landscaping for those 2 projects, which happened. And unfortunately, the owners that own the building now, I don't think they realize that. And what they did, they removed part of that site plan when they removed the garden wall protecting the parking lot from Bloor Street. There was a garden wall there built of perforated block and shrubbery. That was removed and the parking lot enlarged. Actually, it contravenes. They didn't ask for a permit. There's no permit taken up for that. That's not slapping in the wrist, it's just that I want to explain how well designed Markland Wood has been. And of course, if you just drive along Bloor Street between Mill Road and the Etobicoke Creek, there's a concentration of buildings there. Most of the buildings, on most of the time, are attractive, and they're very, very useful, and they blend into the community. And I also want to mention that the report that the new developer, or the developer, has to face is the provincial land use policies. Now, there are some very specific clauses. I'd just like to read a couple of you. And it says, encouraging a sense of place in communities by promoting well-designed built form and by conserving features that help define local character. That's a direction from this policy. There's also one more sentence that I want to say, that submissions or advice affecting the planning matter that are provided by the City Council shall also be consistent with the PPS, which is the Provincial Land Use Policy. So I understand that Etobicoke has to obey and try to follow the provincial land uses. And in my opinion, the development proposed is in excess. I would like to see, honestly, the building on Sun Plains removed. First of all, there's only 29 suites, correct? There's only 32 parking spaces for that building. The other townhouses has to use parking which is going to be in the main underground garage. Well, you know what's going to happen then. People will park everywhere. We have that problem now. I know I travel Markland Drive. I ride my bike along Markland Drive. I try to stay off of it now because there's too many cars when you go south of Bloor. It's a hazardous place to be unless you're in your own vehicle getting away from it. I would like to suggest that the council consider the fact that this new land proposal presented by the province, which we are compelled to follow, that it spends more verbiage in explaining community. And I can't ask you any more than please follow it and see if we can correct the situation and lower a little bit of the density.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Any questions? Could you please make sure you tell your nephew Ronnie I was nice to you when you came here?
Guaranteed.
Thank you, sir. Okay, our next, Antonio Natalizio. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
I need to use this, I'm not going to repeat anything that's already been said tonight because this is a altogether different approach. I've been spending the last year basically on learning about the noise issue here in Markland, and that has led me to this presentation here this evening. I draw your attention to the Transport Canada document on land use in the vicinity of airports. And specifically, this table here, which doesn't show up really very clearly, but the table 2A says that the houses, townhouses or apartment buildings are really not suitable in an area that's designated as noise exposure forecast 30. That means 30 decibels and above, the area is not suitable for development, new development, which is what this document says. So the circle at the top is the intersection of Markland and Bloor Street, very close to where 240 is going to be. This is the contour that's representing the noise exposure forecast level 30. The whole map is known as the noise exposure forecast, and some of you are very familiar with that. So as you can see, that circle is quite a distance from 30. So you might ask, why am I here? Why am I bringing this up? The problem is this noise exposure forecast was done probably in 1990 or 1991. And as you can see, it doesn't reflect the current reality where we have another runway, runway 33L, and 33L goes along this line here. Smack at the center of Markland and Bloor, where this development. So airplanes are going to be flying overhead, actually, at about 700 feet at that location, which suggests that if this development goes ahead, it will be contravening the guidelines issued by Transport Canada as really not being suitable. And what we're doing is we're really committing new people coming into the area to excessive noise levels, which, as we all know, have a significant impact on health. And at this point, I would draw your attention to this report, which is published by the City of Toronto Health Department, that defines the impact of noise on community health. And quoting from this report, an excerpt from the report, there is increasing concern about the impacts of environmental noise on health, especially in urban areas. The growing body of evidence indicates that exposure to excessive environmental noise does not only impact quality of life and cause hearing loss, but also has other health impacts, such as cardiovascular effects, cognitive impacts, sleep disturbances, and mental health effects. If this development goes ahead, we will be subjecting several hundred more people to the excessive noise that we are already coping with in this neighborhood.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Salas Brickus? Good evening, sir. Welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, good evening, councillors, staff, and attendees. I'm Saulius Brickus, the director of the Markland Wood Homeowners Association. I'm part of the special committee formed by the association for the purpose of analyzing and advocating the interests of our community while keeping in mind the rights of the property owner to design and build a suitable housing structure in the neighborhood. I live at 83 Mill Road. To validate the community's interests, 2 surveys were completed by our association, one in 2014 and the most recent one last summer in June-July 2017. In the 2014 survey submitted by 705 Markland residents, a 94% majority indicated opposition to the proposed height, 81% agreed to the lack of respect of existing zoning limits, and 95% of the respondents were concerned about the precedent this would set for future developments of neighboring infill apartment properties. The results are statistically significant. There are 1,300 homes in Markland Wood, and we had over 60% of the residents respond to that survey. The 2017 survey area was focused on the properties near the building site. This was a volunteer-based, labor-intensive, door-to-door canvassing effort. There were 431 signed letters delivered to the city planner of the time, Mr. Travis Skelton. Please keep in mind that there are 1,300 homes in the Markland Wood area, and there are 600 homes close to the building site. These 431 responses are statistically valid. The content of the letters recommended to Mr. Skelton that the proposed height should not exceed the existing height of the apartment building on the same property. Cascading or terracing on two sides would be ideal to mitigate the shadowing effects and visual appearance of solid walls to be observed from the neighboring Tyne Terrace townhouses, as well as the single-family homes from across the street. Our special committee met with the City Planning Department in January 2018 to discuss the progress of this rezoning application, especially since the developer filed an appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board in December 2017. The Planning Department was tasked at that time to write a document titled Request for Direction, which was tabled on the city website 2 weeks ago, which is the matter under consideration tonight. A request that we made to Mr. Skelton, the planner at the time at our January 2018 meeting, was to acknowledge his receipt of the 431 survey letters delivered to him personally in June-July 2017. This he agreed to do for us in the document he undertook to write. For whatever reason, these 431 community survey letters are not referenced in the request for direction report. We as an association think it's important for us to make reference to this tonight. Copies of the survey letters are on file with Councillor Holliday's office. As we came closer to the meeting date of June the 6th, we made our concerns known to the Etobicoke York Community Council about this rezoning proposal. Councillor Crisante, he's not here, but he was here a few minutes ago. We met with him a couple of weeks ago. We met with Councillor Ford 3 weeks ago. Councillor Campbell, we met with you last year at City Hall in the hallway, and we appreciate Elizabeth, updating you on the status of this report, and appreciate your consideration. Councillor DiCiano, we managed to speak to Valerie, who I'm sure relayed our concerns to you on this matter. Councillor DiGiorgio, we appreciate Ms. Catalano's effort to update you on the situation for this application. Councillor Doucette, we'd like to thank your staff member Charlotte for bringing this to your attention. We knew that your schedule was full, and we understand completely. Councillor Grimes, we appreciate your staff member Kim Edgar's efforts to bring this matter to your attention. And we also reached out to Councillors Memolidi, Nunziata, and Palazzo to update them on the status of this application. Councillor Holliday, thank you for being available to our community to hear the voices of our concerns on this project ever since you were elected in 2014. We were very pleased to hear and to know that after hearing all we had to say in our initial meetings, that you would not approve of any structure exceeding even 1 inch over the existing apartment building. Finally, in Markland Wood, we are ready to welcome a new neighbor to the community. We sincerely expect that our new neighbor will have designed a new structure that will satisfy the expectations of the community. We therefore respectfully ask all the councillors assembled tonight to consider the important survey data presented to the Planning Department last summer, and that you vote in support of an amended staff report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right on. That was right on 5. Question, sir? Sir, you have a question. You have a question from Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you, Mr. Brickus. And I just wanted to know if these particular 431 pages look familiar.
They are the ones.
All right.
Thank you. Peter Derry? Peter, there he is. Good evening, Mr. Derry. Welcome.
Good evening, councillors. I reside at 8 Sun Plains Crescent, where I've lived for over 40 years. I think I was 4 when I moved in. Anyway, this could have all been over. By that, I mean I and several other members of the community met with 2 planning staff members a year and a half ago, suggested the 2 amendments, if I can use that phrase, that Ms. Velasquez, our president, has put forward in a motion to you. At that meeting, we were assured by both planners that those requests for amendments were fair and reasonable. We met 6 weeks later. For reasons unknown to us, they were never conveyed to the developer. Now that, in my opinion, emboldened the developer to ignore the requests at subsequent meetings. Out of hand. And that's what brings us here today. because we were very, very close to resolving this. Now, at a community meeting at Silverthorne, it was somewhat of an insult when somebody on behalf of the developer said, what do you object to one floor more for? You can't even see if you're standing on the sidewalk that there's another floor or there's HVAC up there. My response, what's wrong with one floor less? And we know what motivated their decision. Ours was motivated by the desire to have this development conform with the characteristic of the community. Finally, we've talked about precedent, and you've heard more than you need to know already. Precedent and planning. Well, many years ago when I did take a planning course at law school, I remember that the theme was planners are to plan for a community. Mark Creedon's letter addressed this issue, so I don't want to beat it to death. The point being, I would have expected planners to look at the whole area, knowing the area, anticipating what may come forward. Instead, I, like Mr. Creedon, was shocked to learn each application was developed on a standalone basis. That was a shock to me. Finally, and Councillor Campbell, if I can address you, you asked one of my fellow deputants to why I would be concerned when one building is 13 stories and the proposed is 9. Well, the simple fact is those old floors were, I think, 10 feet. The new ones are probably 13, 14. Oh, I missed that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derry. Thank you. Bill Newell? Bill Newell? There's Bill. Hi, Bill. Welcome, Mr. Newell.
Yeah, thank you, councillors, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm probably representing the people who live at 240 Markland Drive, and I'm a resident there. I've been there for 20 years, and we are definitely against this construction of the new buildings. I really want to invite council and Mr. Halliday to come and stand on the corner of Markland Drive and Bloor or Mill Road and Bloor in the mornings between 8 and 10 or 4 and 7 in the afternoon to see the congestion of the traffic. It's ridiculous. Now, they're going to build 280 units total. Well, there's going to be 280 units total trying to get out onto Bloor through Markland Drive and through 2 entrances off the new building proposal. Now, if you were to see the flow of traffic coming along there in the morning, and there's just one underground now at 240, and you have to wait sometimes 10 minutes to get out of that underground. Now, the new building has the same concept, one underground coming in and one driveway going out, plus two little driveways going through the existing building. Wow, that is, it's incredible. I cannot picture or I cannot imagine what it's going to be like with all the additional traffic in the area. And of course, the idea of infrastructure has been brought up at many of our meetings before, and I don't know, I just can't see how that's going to work no matter how many studies you do. And of course, the big one, and I've heard it for the proposal before this particular EY 31.8, that parking for construction for 4 to 5 to 6 years while all these buildings are under construction. 240 Markland has a lot of seniors in it. We're going to feel like trapped rats in there. Can't get out, right? Where the heck are we going to go? Where are we going to park, you know? These thoughts are all going through our head in the building, and we're very concerned about this. As we all know, the owner applied to you people, applied to council, I should say, but did not get any answer within the standard 120 days. Okay, so they only then went to the OMB, of course, which is now called the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, okay? And he got a hearing. Now, I guess everybody here knows when the hearing is going to be, I imagine. It's going to be August the 13th, 2018, at 10 a.m. at the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, 655 Bay Street. So I'm wondering, is this not putting the cart before the horse, sir? I mean, why wasn't council available to look at it when he requested it? Now, your decision here tonight, if it's a vote for yes, with whatever you want to amend, it's certainly going to influence OMB, okay? And that's my worry, okay? A vote no would go a long way to them turning down the project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Newell. So we have one last speaker, Tara Meninsky. Tara? Good evening, Tara. Welcome.
Hi. I'm not as well prepared as the other people here. My father lived, and my family lived in 37 Sun Plains for years. He passed away in December. I'm currently living in the home. I've only recently been made aware of the extent of what's happening in the neighborhood, and I'm not prepared to be able to address this as educated, in such educated fashion as my neighbors. Only to say that I do have some serious concerns about what's coming across the street from my house, or what is being proposed, because I would hope perhaps that it would not. The parking issue, and I've only been there for a few months, is quite serious. It's essentially a one-lane drive either way if there's vehicles parked on both sides of the street. Someone has to pull over in order for the other vehicle to be able to pass. And this is already when we don't have additional how many hundreds of other people and vehicles in the neighborhood. And the construction, I can't even imagine, you know, for 4 to 6 years across the street from my house, with the parking issue that we already have, the traffic issue, like the analogy of feeling like rats stuck in our own home is pretty apt, because I've just stepped into this, and you know, I'm already suffering from some nervous disorders dealing with my father's passing, and the thought of this coming down the pipeline is extremely disturbing to me. And you know, this has been my family home since I was 3. And yeah, I actually did move in about 30-something years ago. And you know, I used to play across the street, you know, and I understand that's their property and they have a right to do what they would, but you know, green space is essential for our mental health, our physical health. This isn't just space that's being unused. It's there because it provides our neighborhood with space. You know, it provides, this isn't Liberty Village, this is Markland Wood, and that's what makes this neighborhood appealing. So I don't have any concrete proposals at this moment other than please don't go ahead with this. I don't have alternative suggestions. I've heard my neighbors suggest a further setback, having single-family townhomes rather than units. I think those are also good suggestions, preferable suggestions. However, I'm against the proposal completely, and so I would request respectfully that you would vote no. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further speakers, we're going to bring into committee now. Questions of staff, Deputy Mayor Holliday.
Thank you. If I may ask a question of planning, and it's going to be a general question, I think. I'll lead into it just as you're coming to the podium, but we have heard from a number of residents that live on Sun Plains and Broadfield, which are the residential streets on the internal side of the building, who are impacted by the, call them the low-rise proposals. I wondered if you could just describe what is before us and the degree of control which we have with the proposal before us, with respect to those buildings, the setbacks, the look, the feel, and if you think back to some of the earlier comments about, you know, what goes on the balconies, what doesn't, what is the look of those, you know, a traditional sort of townhouse versus something that's more like an apartment look. And maybe just to further make a point, we have a zoning proposal before us, and we don't have a site plan before us, and what's different?
Through the chair, just to clarify, so it's the Sun Plains Road building, not more so than the Bloor Street building, is that correct?
Well, and I just wonder if you could just explain to the committee and those listening, you know, the difference between the zoning proposal and a possible future site plan proposal, and what each of those do with respect to the development. Because there is some concern about the degree of control we have at this stage with what's before Community Council.
So through the chair, as you note, Councillor, the application that Community Council has before is for a zoning bylaw amendment. A zoning bylaw amendment is a request to set out parameters for development for a site. So, for instance, as you note, it's to set out what setbacks are required. If a building is a step, how high it goes in certain areas, what the overall height is, those sorts of things. The actual design of the site, we try and flesh out through the zoning bylaw amendment. And by design, I mean the look of the building, what the cladding is going to look like, how the balconies are going to look, what color are the bricks, is it brick versus other types of cladding, that sorts of thing. Those matters are all dealt with through the site plan approval process, and that's something that would follow along and not be dealt with. Sometimes it's dealt with at the same time, but it wouldn't come to Community Council necessarily. It would be dealt with as a delegated process that would be dealt with by staff. But it looks at landscaping and how the building looks and feels from a design perspective. So in terms of what's before Community Council now, as I note that it's the setbacks and stepbacks and the height and basically the envelope within which you could build.
Okay, and then with respect to the comments that we heard about site plan, are those the type of thing that planners take notes on, and at such time that you would consider a site plan, all of that gets funneled into the process? Would that be accurate?
Through the chair, absolutely. I've taken copious notes tonight. When we do get to the site plan process on this property, all those comments will be taken into consideration. Sometimes some councillors have working groups through the site plan process to try and get feedback as well. There's opportunities to have people come in and take a look at the plans and provide us comments individually as well, because they are posted online. It's not a public process like this one is, but we're always open to have comments and feedback.
But it's a separate process?
But it's a separate process.
Okay.
That's correct.
I guess the last really technical question, one of the last speakers just asked about, you know, I'm going to paraphrase, why didn't council make the decision in 120 days? When did the clock start on this application? That 120 days, do we know? Take a year if you want.
The clock starts when we have a complete application.
Would it be fair to say that was 2011?
It was in 2011, I have the date, but it would have been at that time.
And that's close enough, so sort of to give comfort to those that were listening, this was appealed on council's failure to make a decision in 4 months, which we often see, but that 4 months expired in 2011. So here we are now.
That's correct, and it looks like from the history on this file that there were a number of iterations and design changes and discussions with the applicant and the community and the planning staff, all the staff that was involved through the review of the application at the time. So we don't usually bring it to Community Council until we have an application in a form and a shape that we are able to support it.
Right.
Unless we have to go to what is now the LPAT, formerly the Ontario Municipal Board,
okay,
and have to make some recommendations.
Thank you very much.
A question. So, and this is a question maybe for you or maybe for Mr. Cresswell, but in a neighborhood of single-family homes, where you have just local roads, why does planning find it acceptable to have stacked townhouses rather than single-dwelling townhouses where you walk in the front door and you have three levels? And I didn't do it for applause. I mean, it really is, I mean, no, it really, I mean, because it just seems, it seems like, it doesn't really fit the character of a neighborhood where you have single-family homes and, you know, the single dwelling townhomes are much more appealable, they sell more, or for more money, they fit the neighborhood better.
Well, I think what you're talking about, Councillor Campbell, through the chair, is sort of a broad brush statement, and I don't think it applies in every location throughout the city, which is why we look at these things within their individual contexts. The official plan speaks to the neighborhoods being up to 4 stories in height, buildings of townhouses and apartment buildings of being up to 4 stories in height. So the official plan does contemplate a height of 4 stories in the neighborhoods. In this instance, what you have is, it isn't a standard, or isn't a solely single-family community. You do have high-rise apartment buildings, you do have single-family dwellings on the south side of Sun Plains, you do have the townhouse complex, which is immediately to the east of 240 Markland. So there is a diversity of built form in the community. So you can look to the city's official plan. It also speaks to providing for a diversity of housing stock and different types of dwellings. So in terms of built form impacts in a neighborhood, when we're looking at those kinds of things, it's about height, it's about shadowing, it's about overlook, it's about density, it's about all of those kinds of things. So if there is dwelling stock in a neighborhood that is a diverse and range of housing, then we would say you do not need an official plan amendment to introduce a type of housing that may not exist in that community. In this instance, the stacked townhouses, for example, don't exist in this community. But there's a diverse housing stock that does. If you were to put this in, I don't know, 5 blocks to the south where you have a standard single-family community, then you would say it doesn't fit the character of the community. You do need an official plan amendment to introduce that. So it's about the impacts that's created by the built form of the development, rather than suggesting, well, I like a single-family I like a single townhouse unit with a driveway out the front, as opposed to a stacked townhouse product, per se.
Okay, but we do offer opinion on built form in the official plan, or in our not in our official plan, but, you know, in some of our planning documents, we talk about built form and suitable built form for particular parts of the city. And so, but we're sort of silent on that in neighborhoods where there's single-family homes then.
No, again, Councillor, what I'm trying to say is it's about the nuances of individual communities and the characters of individual communities. I mean, the discussion previously today in Councillor Doucette's apartment neighborhood, if you looked at the built form of that apartment neighborhood, it's substantively different than the built form of the apartment neighborhoods that some of the residents were talking about tonight, like Liberty Village. It's a different kind of context. At its very high level, it's an intense apartment neighborhood, but when you get to drill down into the details, there is levels of differences and characteristics that emerge when you look at them. So again, using a very broad brush approach that says we don't like stacked townhouses because there's none of them that exist in this community doesn't really fit the parameters of what the official plan is talking to in terms of diverse building stock.
Thanks for the answer.
Thank you. See no further questions of staff. Councillor Holiday, the floor is yours. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Giorgio, question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions because of the, largely due to my unfamiliarity with the zoning that exists in Etobicoke, but notwithstanding that, this is an apartment neighborhood, and I noticed the coverage is 27%. What's the normal coverage in the zoning bylaw in North York? In Etobicoke?
Through the chair, I don't know the coverage offhand. The normal coverage in the bylaw, I would have to check.
Okay. If it's anywhere in the, in other areas, like North York and whatever, 30 is an absolute minimum. But the reason I ask that question is that it is, and I'm amazed that the developer was not here for us to ask him any questions, but I'm sure he has the flexibility to modify his proposal to actually increase footprints on a building and yet lower the heights, number one. In the R4 zone that, for resident, does permit any commercial on grade?
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with the zoning, the particular zoning parameters in that kind of detail. I'm sorry, I just don't have that kind of background on this file. There was some commercial that was originally proposed in this application. It has since been removed, so there's no commercial proposed.
So let me ask this question. Is there flexibility on the site to alter the height of the 9-story building proposed to be, really it doesn't front on Bloor Street, because I notice there's a setback of probably at least 25 feet, but is there flexibility to enlarge the footprint and lower the height to 8 stories and maybe even?
We have to be very careful how we answer this question, Counselor, because we have to, through the chair, we have to recognize that we are under, for want of a better term, litigation at the municipal board.
Okay. No, stop.
You'll stop.
But
That's good.
at a general level.
Stop there.
Yeah. So at a general level, we have had conversations with the applicant. The desires of the community to bring the building down by 1 floor are well known. We did talk to the applicant about it, and the applicant said, we're not prepared to do that.
Okay.
So the applicant filed an appeal of the development proposal that they had before us that goes back to last summer, and that's what we responded to in our staff report.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Holiday, the floor is yours. I understand you have a number of amendments.
Thank you, Chair Grimes. I do have a number of motions, and if I may ask Madam Clerk to put the first one 1A. And I'm going to do my best to go through these and explain what they are and offer some comment. And please go ahead and put the image up. Brad, we'll get to that in a moment. So the first one is a technical amendment. What we know is that the site plan that is shown in the report is a dated version, and we just want to have the most current site plan appended to this report. So this is technical in nature, and the staff helped me prepare that. It's important because motion 1B, if I may have that, states the City Council, we're going to recommend that City Council refuse this application on the basis of some of the comments that we've heard tonight. And very specifically that we ask the City Solicitor to engage in a settlement process that looks at the conditions of reducing the overall height and dealing with step-back terracing, which is described in the motion. Motion 1C is similar to a motion which I presented at the last file that we considered, which is to remove the eligibility of the residents at 240 Markland Drive from applying under Chapter 925 for permit parking on street. And I will make the comment that this has been a common thread through the entire discussion with the Markland Wood Homeowners Association and a number of residents that I've been working with on an independent basis to deal with the parking issues that are going on in this area. I think a lot of things are happening. I think there are visitors to the apartment buildings. I think there are residents of apartment buildings that have opted not to rent a space for some reason and park their car on the road. The law says right now the parking limit is 3 hours. And I think most people get that in central Etobicoke, and I mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. If you close my eyes and pluck me off the street that I live on in the ward and you drop me in Markland Wood, I'd feel right at home. It's just like the street that I live on, many of the streets there. And I understand the pride and the character of the neighborhood. And what I do understand is on-street parking changes the character of the neighborhood and urbanizes it. And I think that's an important discussion we should have in central Etobicoke. It's not so much about development and change, but it's about how fast, how rapid, how big, and how fast are we becoming like the downtown. And I think my preference and most others feel it shouldn't be that fast. So one of the things that we can do is keep an eye on parking and the creation of on-street parking. So this motion will help protect that. It doesn't. It is among a series of things that we will do to help protect that. The next motion is 1D, and that is some additional content to the requirements of this report and this process. And I'm going to ask for a number of plans. A construction management plan be dedicated. I'd like to see a construction mitigation plan. So that starts to deal with the things that the residents have brought up about, how are we going to manage this over the next number of years? And I'll say the same thing I said to the residents on Dixfield. The councillor's office is here to help deal with this. I want to see, very specifically in this motion, a parking management plan for the construction. And there isn't any magic solution to that, but I think there's a process that needs to be gone through with myself and the community to try to figure out how we're going to make this work. And finally, a communication plan. You've also got a very, very well-connected residents association and other associations within Tyne Terrace and some of the other buildings nearby. I think the people need to know what's happening through these processes, and I have some experience with this, and I have no doubt that the developer will engage with us, but I'm going to ask for that plan to be articulated, because I think having a dialogue through any change process helps to manage that change. And finally, motion number 1E is that we ask the city clerk in a symbolic fashion to deliver a copy of the Good Neighbor Guide, which is something that the city has published to help people deal with construction. It sets out a lot of the rules around construction. It sets out the processes and how to deal with things, anything from trees to groundwater to noise to dust to parking to construction and road allowance, all of those sorts of things. And I want to bring awareness to this, and I want to signal that you know, these things are important to the community, they're important to me, and there's a process to manage this going forward. I think I'll round this out if we can switch to the overhead monitor. I had some pictures that I printed out, which is an aerial view. I guess we'll get them up in a second. I did my best to match, so they don't quite fit on the screen, but with all the discussion tonight, we talked a lot about detail on the street with the low-rise buildings, but I also just want to back up and think about the themes of time and space. And they come up in many plans and development applications. We're at the here and now. We're talking about it today. We're talking about a 9-story building. You know, what's the big deal? It's next to another building. It's close in height. You know, back up for a moment and zoom out. So there's the space. The right building there is 240 Markland. There's another building you see immediately across the street. You see another one immediately to the north, and you see a massive parking lot at the golf course. There's the space that I need to put my head into, not the little site plan around here. It's actually the block around that this project is going to influence. And I fully respect the opinions of lawyers, and you know, that in law there aren't necessarily precedents, and that in planning there aren't necessarily precedents, but there is a signal based on what is approved and what's built here to the other buildings that are around about what public opinion is on this matter. And it will inspire, it will embolden others to try other things. And I think it's very important that we get it right, because this will be the first domino in a series of others. And there are other things, as one of the speakers talked about, in the ward where there's infill. We heard about one tonight. So I want to make sure that we get it right. And again, the other factor is the time. And it's not about the time about this one particular decision that we're making, but it's the ones that we're going to see over 10 years and the changes that we're going to see, that we see all over the city over the next 10 years. And what is this neighborhood going to look like? My preference is the neighborhood that we all hope and desire, not necessarily an overly urbanized one, although we do recognize there is change. So to my colleagues in the Etobicoke York Community Council, it is unusual for me to depart from the recommendations that were brought before us from staff, because I have a tremendous degree of respect for what they have brought us, and have confidence in their diligence in all of the work that they've done to bring something here. But I do believe that there is an important question put before us. And, you know, if the 431 pages that I can't submit as a petition because of the way that it was structured, can't acknowledge that, that can be backed up with the, I don't know, about 250 petitions that I got 2 years earlier, and that can be backed up with the countless meetings that I've had with the Residents Association and individuals, and the entire theater at Silverthorne Collegiate that was packed full of people with concern over this development. So I hope you support my motions. I know the Residents Association is completely behind this and ready to engage in finding a solution on this matter. And really that's what it is. It's not a fight, it's finding a solution on the matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Seeing no further speakers, I think you have 5 motions, if I'm correct?
Something like that.
Can we take them as a package?
Yep.
As a package? All in favor of the 5 motions by Deputy Mayor Holiday? Opposed? That's unanimous. Carries. Clause amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Holiday, you have a motion to interact and introduce and enact the confirming bill?
Sure.
Underneath your petition.
There it is. Thank you, Chair Grimes. The Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceeding of the Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 31 on June 6, 2018.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion adjourned by Mr. Ferracuti. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Good night.